Good afternoon, everyone. You're here with Paula and Shannon from Sage Wellness Connection, and we are continuing on with our exploration of the 8 dimensions of wellness. And today we're going to be talking about spiritual wellness. So we're really excited to have you all join us today. And of course, we always like to acknowledge and thank the Canadian Mental Health Association and the Rural Mental Health Project for sponsoring our workshops. And Shannon's going to dive into a little bit more about the Rural Mental Health Project.
Absolutely. And probably just before we begin, just in case some of you haven't met us before, we do have a history ourselves of working in.
Oh, I guess we missed that slide. That's what's wrong.
Yeah. So we have a deep history in working in the wellness industry, I guess we'll say, in the human service industry. Paul and I didn't know when we both began our journeys that we would land here today with almost virtually the same background, but it seems to be the case that we started off in recreation and recreation therapy and things like that, which supports people in basically the domains of wellness. And we decided to expand that because we are true believers in our intellectual well-being, that we always like to expand our knowledge because we're always very curious about what is the newest thing and how we can really support people as we move forward. So we had our bachelor's, or we were able to finish our bachelor's in human services. And of course, we weren't done there. We really felt that the psychological health and safety was a great fit if we're going to continue down this path, and that's working with people within the workplaces, but all of those same principles really fit within our communities, in our homes, all of those kind of things. But I can't end without mentioning our following one of our true passions, which was yoga. And I will let Paula explain a little bit more about her history in it. It's far deeper than my own. I started out in the fitness industry as a personal trainer, teaching fitness classes, all of those kind of things. But I always felt that there was kind of a piece missing to that. And yoga has just been kind of that great balance, that extra piece of the puzzle for me that's just added that other layer to that health and well-being, that it's not just a physical piece to it, but also that other layer, which we'll probably dive in a little bit more as we move through our spiritual wellness today too. But Paula, I'll just let you explain a little bit about your history and so on around that.
Sure. Yeah, it's always interesting to us that we landed in working in the same agency with our backgrounds in recreation. Shannon's was in rec therapy, and mine was in programming for communities around recreation, which was always interesting for me. And then as I got older, I stumbled upon a Reiki practitioner, and that really developed my interest in the holistic practices. And so I took courses in Reiki and Chinese fire cupping and aromatherapy and things like that, and then begin to explore the yoga. And I think like Shannon said, we will talk a little bit more about yoga because it's such a perfect combination with the yoga and the spirituality for us today. So yeah, that led us to the Rural Mental Health Project, just really wanting to be able to help others connect the dots for themselves around their own wellness. And for us to be able to empower others is an amazing opportunity. So now I will let Shannon talk a little bit more about the Rural Mental Health Project.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point. The Rural Mental Health Project has been able to expand not just in our community, but across Alberta, in really focusing on the rural aspect. Of course, lots of things blend and can look somewhat the same when we talk about urban areas to rural areas, but then there's lots of things that do look different. And I think we've tried to have people hear that message, that it does look different if you live in a rural area, just whether it be about access, whether it be about population. So sometimes it's really hard if you're even trying to start a group because the population density looks dramatically different. So we were so happy to hear that the Canadian Mental Health Association was looking beyond just those rural aspects of mental health and well-being, that they really wanted to bring this focus. And with their principles, it felt that it fit well within our own philosophies and beliefs, because they want to make it community driven. And we live within this community, so that's what makes sense. We're reaching out to people within this community, which also makes it collaborative too, because we know that when we're talking about our mental health and well-being, this is not something you do alone. You need other people. If you need connection, you need to connect with somebody else, even if it's just on that very basic level. But also you need sometimes other supports, whether that's with your finances or with your occupation. You need to reach out to other people, even as Paula and I did, that we decided to expand our own knowledge in order for our own occupation to be expanded, and it was able to develop in our Sage Wellness. So it's kind of along that same type of philosophy. But what we also like about it, that this isn't just a project that's based in one area. It's not just about kids, it's not just about seniors, it's about everybody that lives within the community. And that's taking in consideration that we are rural. So that community could mean not only do we have a strong military contingent here, because there's a lot of training, the military base almost makes up half of our population when you want to look at it that way, but this is an agriculture community too. So we've got to make sure that we're answering the call and the message that we are this agriculture community. So what does mental health and well-being look like if you are that farm family, and how do you interact with that and making that accessible? Because maybe you're an hour and a half away from even Wainwright, but maybe Wainwright is the place where you do all the rest of the things and aspects of your life, from your shopping to your schooling to all of those kind of things. But ultimately, it is a strength-based program. So we're just trying to highlight the wonderful strengths that we have within our communities, and we'll be highlighting some of those again today, because there are some great people that could support us. And, Paula, I think you mentioned in another webinar, and there's the unusual suspects, as we like to say sometimes, that we hadn't thought of, that could also be a great strength and a great connection for you or for us as we move forward, whether that's the peer group or support group that's more informal. Doesn't mean everything needs to be at a high clinician level of support. It can just be your neighbor sometimes. And then finally, we like to say that we're trying to, within this project and within what Paula and I do, is remove that really, the judgments and biases that maybe we've created across times, even for ourselves, or whether we need to just challenge that about what does mental health mean? Because we have put it in this very kind of box about mental health must mean a diagnosis or a concern or a problem, but it's not. 5 in 5 people have mental health. That means we all have mental health, whether there's some challenges with it where we need some support, or maybe it's completely healthy. That is great, but we're all learning. So at some point in our life, we're going to have to look at ways to develop that so we can evolve and be a part of our world and our society. So that's a big piece of the project that we like to highlight before we move forward.
Yeah, really just understanding that mental health is just one aspect to our overall health, that mental health is not equal to mental illness, which
Absolutely.
again is not to be stigmatized either, but that this is just breaking it down even further to really promote a true understanding of what mental health is. I as well wanted to mention a little bit about the collaborative part of the Rural Mental Health Project, and it's been one of my favorite parts. And of course, Shannon and I love to have conversations with each other. That's a bonus. But when we add a community partner into the mix, it just brings a bit of a deeper level, and it expands our thinking as well. And so that's been a really exciting piece of this project for us.
Oh, I'd have to say, and I've probably said it a billion times, that I love doing the podcast. We brought on some great people, and we're going to continue down that path of bringing and highlighting people within our community and bringing what they have to the table. It's just been so much fun, and we just do it in such a way that is just about a conversation.
Mhm.
Right? It's not formal, but it's just like you were sitting at the table, or maybe you're down at the local coffee shop here and just having a conversation about mental health.
Absolutely. So to explore our philosophy before we begin talking specifically about spiritual wellness. So as we always say, if you've been following us, we like to take a complete look, a broad look when we're talking about wellness and engage a holistic approach to well-being, because we can't live our lives in silos. Each part of our life, like our physical wellness, our emotional wellness, all of those cannot be looked at separately. All areas of our lives relate to one another, and they're all interconnected, and they're all interdependent on each other as well, which is so important. And we talk about a lot about that as we go through this. When one area is out of sync, it creates an imbalance and it impacts our entire system. Shannon likes to talk about the tire analogy in relation to the wellness wheel. So I'll let you talk about that, Shannon.
Oh, for sure. I think we try to highlight that almost every time we're talking, whether it
Mhm.
be a podcast or a webinar, because I think a tire is something we can all relate to, whether we just bike or we drive a vehicle, that we know that when that tire light comes on in our vehicle, there's something up. Sometimes we don't always want to look at it. Sometimes we want to ignore it a little bit, but we know that our vehicle in its entirety is just not working as well as it should, because that tire is slightly deflated. And what I also like about the analogy around the wheel is the wheel is constantly moving. So that's just like our wellness wheel. It may not always be in the same area that is slightly deflated, because maybe we've had an opportunity to grow a little bit or manage our stress a little bit or make other connections that's built up our social well-being. But it's constantly moving, because sometimes those areas do deflate because we get busy doing something else, like our occupation. It takes us away, gets us focused on getting work done. So therefore, we are maybe not managing our emotional, our stress level, those kind of things. So that's why we talk about that wheel, is because it is that constant motion, and we know it's not working well, but sometimes we have to use our strength in order to pump up that other area so we can keep on going down the road in a nicer, smoother fashion.
Yeah, if you've ever ridden a bike and you've had a flat tire and you're just trying to get home and it's bumping along and
Yeah.
it's just not a smooth ride, that's what's happening when one area is really depleted. And I think because we're in still within the time where COVID is really affecting our lives. And if you think of, if you've had COVID yourself, or you've known someone who's recovering from COVID or had COVID, and you think about what it's done to their physical health, I imagine there's lots of things that pop up as well. So their physical health is depleted. So that wheel is really depleted on that side of the physical wellness, but it might be a little bit low in other areas as well. Their occupation, especially if they don't have sick time, that's really affected their occupational wellness. It's affected their emotional wellness. They're stressed. I know I've heard that lots of people, when they get COVID, they're emotional because they're worried about who else has it impacted. Who did they see? Did I make someone else sick? And the financial wellness of, again, if you don't have sick time, it's going to impact that. It's going to impact your social wellness. You're isolated. You're not able to get out. I know that I've had friends that have had their kids go through COVID, then they've got COVID and they didn't see many people for a month. And you just think about what that wheel would look like rolling along with those areas that are all, depleted. There's some areas that might even feel like they're flat, but that's where we need to call on. I'm going to use spiritual wellness because that's what we're talking about today. call on an area such as spiritual wellness, that maybe you can use that area to just carry you along. And then slowly you'll notice that the other areas are starting to inflate again and round out the wheel, because you're drawing on that sense of self and that sense of spiritualness, whatever that is for you, to be able to help you through those other hard times.
And I think because as we're moving into the spiritual, mental health and well-being piece of this, I think to just a recent example of a friend that her son was injured and quite severely so, landed in the hospital, weren't sure kind of what that prognosis was going to look like, because it was a very, very serious incident. And that is one strength that's always been within her, is her spiritual wellness. She has created a full community around that. So it answers all of those other pieces. They support her emotionally. They even financially have supported her because they're in the States, and that, that medical treatment can look quite a bit different than what we experience up here in Canada. So I look to that example and see that how just that reach out has really surrounded her. And these are her people that she met in that spiritual realm of things. It is in her belief and value system. And these people, like I said, surrounded her, kept her connected with other people, kept her kind of pumped up when she needed it, listened to her cry when she needed it. But we're just there, helped her with her occupation when she needed it. So sometimes we think that, spiritual is just this one little piece of the pie, but just by that example alone, it shows you across that entire 8 or 7 other areas that we, by that collaborative approach, reached out and supported her so her wheel could keep moving because it still had to.
Absolutely. And I think, oh, I was looking for a different slide, but again, it's not there. The slide that shows the areas of, of strength and the areas of weakness. But I'm thinking about your friend, and to get that area of spiritual wellness strong, she had to work at that. That this isn't something that we can just sit back and say, I want my wheel to be whole. We have to make a conscious effort. We have to be intentional about filling up these areas of our lives to cultivate them and make them stronger. It doesn't just come by chance that she had this beautiful community behind her. This takes work and intention.
Yeah. And I think that is such an important point, because it doesn't matter. It's not just about our spiritual well-being. It is in each and every one of those domains, right? If we're not going to put intention in it, there's no way for it to build up. And I think we can see it, when people relate to it, because probably social media and media in general really focus on like the physical attributes of people. So we're quick to understand that we know that if we eat well or we exercise, we sometimes can see those results in a physical sense, in a concrete sense. But then when we get into these other pieces that are harder to see, like intellectual wellness or spiritual wellness, it's hard. Like, how do we build that up in the same way? We can't just go for a walk, right, and see maybe instant results. But we do have to do the same type of work that we would if we were going to the gym and all of the rest of it, to build up that sense of well-being within that domain.
Absolutely. I think it's a good time to take a little bit of a look at what we think spiritual wellness is. So spiritual wellness allows you to develop a set of values and beliefs that help you seek meaning and purpose. Spirituality can be represented in ways, for example, through self-care rituals, self-kindness, yoga, meditation, or religious practices. And that's just to name a few. We'll dive a little deeper as we go through this webinar. Being spiritually well means knowing which resources to use to cope with issues that arise each day. And so your example with your friend was a perfect example to connect us to our spiritual wellness.
And I think we tend to dive maybe ourselves a little bit deeper into the spiritual wellness when we do have a whether it be traumatic or not situation that occurs. Sometimes we're looking for the purpose and meaning in that. Why did this happen? Why did it happen to us? Why did this happen to my child? Why did this happen to my friend? What is my purpose of being here if these things are going to happen? And I think even the last 2 years has had many people reflect on, oh, I chose to have a family. Why did I choose to have a family? And I don't think that's a bad thing to begin to question those things, because then we are actually being intentional about learning more, building more. And then there are more possibilities of what maybe finding a place where we fit. Like this friend of mine, she did have to cultivate that across time. It's been a part of her purpose, but in these situations, she's questioned it herself. Is this the spirituality that is going to be able to answer those questions of why did this happen? And it's okay to be able to be even angry with it at times. But she had the people around her to be able to support her and not judge her over that questioning, just allow her to experience the emotions and feelings that all that she was having, just even out of the fear piece alone, and work her way through that and still have this beautiful community around her to support her.
Exactly. And I think it that would allow her to feel safe to have those questions, because that community was basically had her back. So she could, because that's part of being human, is to be able to, try to work through things, process and question. And with that strength behind her, she's more likely to come back to that place.
Hmm. And, like we said, that's something she can call upon when obviously we know her emotional well-being was being called into question as well, just for her own sense. But all of those other aspects, she still needed to work. She still had all of those things happening, but it was something that she could rely on, even though she was even questioning some pieces around that.
So let's explore this a little bit deeper. So I know, Shannon, when we were talking earlier, some words that jumped out for us were peace and meaning. And really, um, we're not here to try to tell you what you need to do to develop your spiritual well-being. It's going to be different for all of us, just like what I need to develop my physical well-being might be different than what you need. And so the same goes for spirituality. It's not a one size fits all type of thing. And so it really is, if you're being reflective, maybe you're journaling, maybe you're consciously and intentionally trying to cultivate the spiritual wellness, because there comes a time in many people's lives where they're trying to figure out what is missing, what is that gap, what are they, or questioning what is the bigger meaning of things. And lots of times we want to find meaning, we want peace, and we don't really know where to start. But often we talk about just being self-reflective.
Because what a great way to begin. We not too long ago did an intellectual wellness webinar as well. And we really talked about going back to that almost childhood sense of curiosity.
Mhm.
That's okay, right? Because if you don't know where you land right now, or even if you do, and you want to broaden that meaning for yourself, you have to call upon that curiosity and, even sometimes bravery, I'll say, because it may look different than what our friends or our family, or even what people gave to, thought would work for us, like their opinions around what they feel would be working well for us, because that's where they land. It's okay. And that's what we're hoping to get the message across today, is call upon those things, find out for yourself what it truly means for you, find some maybe tools that we hope to talk about today as well, that where you can be reflective, that maybe that leads you down the path, no different than in your intellectual wellness, where we talked about you could go read a book, but maybe that's going to also trigger some creativity, because now we're able to envision what the author was trying to tell us, and the colors and the people and the voices and the music or whatever it is, so now we've worked on two things. We've got some creativity, but we also are building our intellect. That's kind of what we're saying here as well. Just allow yourself, open yourself up with those tools to say, what is my meaning? What is the things, and how do I need to find that sense of, whether it's, like we said, peace, or a sense of gratitude. There's all kinds of words, I guess, that we could throw out in here. But most importantly, it is that area of exploration that we think is the most important.
That's what I was just going to say, that the exploration piece, we're going to move on, but I think it's important to note that this exploration piece can continue for your entire life. Even if you have, if I had a strong foundation, spiritual foundation, I still might be exploring, because I think that's what the purpose of life is. It's constantly being curious, like we've talked about. It's that constant exploration. So as we move on to our discover section, just keep in mind that the exploration piece is important, because we always need to be open to learning and growing as we go on in our lives. So sorry.
Go ahead.
I think with this section, this again makes me think about your friend. So as we talk about being grounded, when we come upon times of change, times of adversity, times of transition, you think across the last 2 years, right? So many of us probably just wanted to feel grounded, because there was so much unknown. And that's what having a strong foundation of spiritual wellness can allow us to feel, is really feeling grounded. And then it also helps us feel resilient when we're faced with these situations that we can't control. We're able to go through these situations and then grab on to our spiritual wellness to ground us, and then we can bounce back, which is what resiliency is.
Absolutely. Because, like we said, when we hit those times of adversity, or even across these last 2 years, there has been so many things that we couldn't predict, that were out of our control. And I think that's why we kind of look to something that is bigger than ourselves for the answers, because we maybe don't have all the answers, and that's okay. And we do have to draw upon something if we're going to find some sense of resiliency to make our way through it in that, very tough, tragic situation. For my friend, it was about her faith. It was about her community. That was something she could draw upon. But I think even for her, she learned even more about herself in it, because of the challenging situation, because we're never, she wasn't sure of the outcomes, and those are some of the similarities of what we've experienced across the last 2 years. We don't know the outcome, and we're probably still kind of there. We still don't know the outcome. And when we're faced on these times of what we want to call normal, what is normal going to look like, even though normal is this constant moving piece, but it seems to provide us some sense of security, that we think we know what normal is. So when we're challenged what normal is and what is going to be, that's where we've got to call on something that sometimes is bigger than ourselves, and find out what that means to us.
Yeah, for sure. I know for myself, I'd say probably the last 20 years, I've been on a bit of a path exploring what spirituality means to me. And I think for myself, maybe prior to some of that, I was always, wanting to learn and grow and, discover things about myself. But before I was consciously trying to work on my spiritual wellness, the word that comes to mind for me was friction. I didn't have a foundation to really ground me. And there was a lot of friction, a lot of I just didn't know where to turn when there was hard times, right? And I really love this piece in this slide about surviving with grace and inner peace. I think that's what I've learned. That's what spiritual wellness has brought to me. Being able to have grace with myself is really about ease, living with a little bit more ease. And then I think you said this earlier, Shannon, when we were talking, that being able to have grace with other people is learning to be able to forgive, learning to be more tolerant. And then this, that really, I think, impacts how you are inside. It allows space for that inner peace because there's not as much friction. You're just living with a little bit more ease, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's a great way to put that, that not every day is a struggle. Not every day has to mean something, be something, that you can just live in the day without having to answer to something. Like it's just,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And
I
when
like
something
that.
happens, you have that, something to grasp onto. And I think that's what I was
Yeah.
missing before. Like when I think about uh, like a period of my in my life before that, there I just didn't have anything to really grasp on me to kind of ground me, if we're going to continue to use that word. It was basically how I felt.
Mm. And I think even in my own experiences as well, right? We had a multitude of influences. We had
Mhm.
grandparents that were very strong in their faith, and it was very rigid in many ways. And you either fit within it or you were on the outside of it. I had friends that were quite similar to that belief system. So, which of course becomes a challenge because at some point, your opinions and beliefs are going to rub up against somebody else. So it has been a bit of a journey, I think, even for myself. Where do I fall in that do I follow the influences of just what has been told to me has been the only way, the right way of doing things? Well, right is in a very loose term, right?
Yeah,
It's
for
their
sure.
right. And so I've taken those years too to find a place, and I believe that I'm not there yet. I'm still learning. I'm still trying to
Exploring, right?
explore. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Where exactly I fall in that, and we talked earlier about our joy and love of being a part of yoga, and how that has really brought a piece that I felt was missing, not just in that physical aspect of wellness, that for sure it brings that there too. But, and I was always doing that physical wellness, like it felt like a comfortable place for me to be. I was really connected to it, but I always felt there was like this other
Hmm.
piece missing. Like, and I didn't, initially when I started, I certainly didn't think, oh, it's yoga. Um, it's been that journey to figure out that yoga has been able to bring what I call that missing piece to the puzzle, because it has this spiritual aspect to it, in something that I love, that nurtures the body and the mind and the soul. And like we always say, that really holistic piece. And for me, yoga has brought that back. But it also, at times is rubbed up against what, that other versions of faith have been. So I've had to challenge that for myself too.
Yeah, to bring about an understanding. And I think um, when you don't dive into that, then you're not going to be able to use that piece. If it's yoga, that extra piece to the puzzle, you're not going to be able to truly use that to be able to guide yourself through those difficult times, because in the back of your mind, there's still going to be a part that's going to be challenging that. Well, I don't know if that really fits with what I grew up with. So is this right? So you do have to explore it, right? To be able to understand it a little bit more. And I think you talked about earlier, maybe it was just you and I, but just even to understand how that fits with those values that you grew up with.
Oh, absolutely. Like, having that stronger Christian faith belief, right? And then what would appear not really connected to yoga,
Hmm.
especially as I dove into it a little bit more. And I think I made that even a part of my objective in learning it is, can it fit together? Like, who's deciding this doesn't fit together, and how does it fit together in a world that, and maybe in my world, it can fit together. So it's just always opening yourselves up to explore that, because there is no right or wrong answer. So that works for each person differently. But I like when we go back to that grace piece, is allowing that grace for yourself, that let's maybe we don't have to have the answer for that yet. And maybe we have grace for others in knowing that they're standing in what their values and beliefs are, and they're just not there in being able to see that there could be a different version.
Well, could you imagine if we all of a sudden knew all the things that we're supposed to know in life at one time? Like, there's just, I can't even wrap my brain around that. It's a process, it's practice, it's just discovery, and it's exciting, and it's okay that we can take it step by step, because it allows it to settle in the body, in the mind, in the soul, and for us to really be able to understand and embody and become one with whatever it is that we're learning. And then it allows us to seek more, or be inspired, like we talked about when we did our intellectual wellness webinar, right? It's things inspire us, and then we want to know more, so we go down a little bit further on the path. So, sorry, go ahead.
Just before we go on, I want to say that, and I'm sure we did have said it before, but it does also expand our community, right? Like this friend of mine, it really did, because she cultivated and she can remain true to what her beliefs were. It cultivated a community. And so when there was a time and a need to call upon that community, it was there for her as well. And I think that does become important. We live on this earth with multiple people for a reason. We're just not alone here. And we've been clear about that, though that can look different as well for everybody. But we still, as we know, we need other people in whatever capacity in our life. That becomes an important piece to it as well.
Exactly. In whatever capacity, that really speaks to me, because I know for myself, I grew up in a household where the belief was that you take care of you and your own, and there wasn't a huge community. So for me, I thought that was right. I had to challenge that, and I had to be okay with opening myself up to allow people in and accept help and accept support. And then my desire to give back grew as well, as I opened myself up to that. And I think when you said community, I was just thinking of our little yoga community, our community of yoga teachers, and then the like broader community as well. And that's become really important to me in the last couple of years as well, because especially with COVID and being isolated and working from home a little bit more and things like that, having that community really became essential for me.
And I think is the funny part of it. That's probably not even really why I went down the yoga path, right? I wasn't
No, me
looking for another
neither.
community. Yeah, and yet I've enjoyed it as well. And sometimes that's why I think you're so right. We got to stay open to these kind of things, because you don't know. Just because you think you might know, right in that one space in time of where you're at, if you allow yourself to be open to it, and it's like this, having this yoga community now. I would never thought that. I know when I started, I thought I'm never going to teach it. I just want to learn a little bit more. I know there's something missing. And I don't even know if I truly believed it was yoga that was missing. But because I did challenge myself of saying, okay, and maybe broke it up in some pieces, that just made it okay to just start in one manner, that I've landed way over here in a different version. And that is just being open to the process. You're right.
Absolutely. So where do you start? And I think that's something that I know I struggled with myself, was just, I didn't know where to start. And I was really fortunate that I stumbled upon a friend that was kind of going through the same things that I was, and we explored the Reiki and all of that together, and the meditation, and it gave me a really nice anchor and a good starting point. But Shannon and I talk a lot about self-reflection, like we said earlier, and also journaling. And it doesn't have to be in a book, journaling in that type of way, everyday type of practice, but sometimes it can be writing things down just to be able to see them on the paper, to take a look at it, to be able to just process and percolate with those ideas. And here's some examples of questions that you can ask yourself. What gives my life meaning and purpose? And it doesn't have to be, what is my purpose in life?
Yes, I
But it
like.
is just like you said, what gives your life meaning could be having a community, having yoga. Like, it can be simple things. It can be sitting at home on a Friday night with a significant other, just being there. Maybe it's watching movies together. It doesn't have to be this elusive kind of grandeur when we think of the word spirituality. It's just, let's simplify it and break it down. Because if you think about like being with a significant other, watching movies, and then you think about what gives my life purpose, it really is connection. It's
Yes.
about that connection with that person, being together, having time together, communicating, or it could be family, being with family, right? So it's just throwing things out and being okay to be wrong, I guess. Like, if, just throwing things
Work
out
and
there.
work. Yep, for sure.
What gives me hope? And again, I think we've talked about a lot of this, especially with your example of your friend, her people around her, her own faith, I'm sure, was a
Yes.
huge part of giving her hope.
Yes.
I know for myself, just being able to get up every day, waking up and being able to actually get out of bed gives me hope. Starting my day, lots of times for me, it is getting messages from my kids or having my dogs around. Those kind of things push me out of, like, if I'm ever in a bit of a funk or feeling emotional, those kind of things push me forward, because you have to still feed your animals, support your children, those kind of things.
Mhm. And sometimes you're right, those are the things that draw us out just to get
Mhm.
us going. But then, and I was just thinking that myself, often we have situations happen, some positive, some not such positive, and just reflecting upon that and realizing where I absolutely thought I needed to be and it had to be this way. Um, but of course, it didn't work out, and being super disappointed, but then being able 5 years later look back and say, oh, I see, wasn't that lucky that the path sent me this way instead? And now I got to meet all of these different people, or I got to be a part of whatever it was. I think that's been an important thing for myself, is just to draw a line back sometimes. Doesn't always have to. Not everything had to have the, like you said, the big meaning of this happened and now I'm here kind of thing. But often if we go back and we draw that path, even though it's not straight, it's often all curvy and up and down and whatever, we realize, oh, okay, I guess that makes sense. It's even simple things. I remember thinking, I am never again living in a rural area. You cannot make me. And I was
Mhm.
adamant, like, absolutely, no, you can't make me go back. I love the way it is here. But you're right. When I began to look at what my purpose was, what my meaning was, what are the things that make me hopeful, it's always been family for me. So even when I took off for a while and lived down east, and then my sister had her babies, and I thought, they're never going to know me.
Mhm.
Am I going to be okay with that? And I've had to make decisions kind of based around that will I be okay with that if I'm not a part of it? If it's okay and I'm feeling okay, there's no right or wrong. It's not my decisions would be right for somebody else. It's really looking within yourself to say, am I going to be okay with that? What is that purpose that I'm looking for? Do I want to be that good mom, or that good aunt, or involved aunt, or whatever it is? um, it's just taking that time to reflect. And I like your idea of writing things down, but also sometimes for me, it's about pictures, right? It's
Oh,
about
yeah.
maybe drawing something that has inspired me in the moment. And, I heard one person, she was talking about she does journal and she never looks at it again. It's something she needs. It's her way of
Like a
just,
brain dump, right?
yeah,
She gets it out.
yeah. So she said, I can say some pretty harsh things. I can just kind of do and be whatever in that, and then not have to feel bad or guilty, because otherwise you might find yourself like almost checking yourself on what you're writing.
Mm.
Oh, that
Or
sounds
it
bad.
can bring you down having to go back. It's, almost like reliving trauma in a way sometimes.
Yes. And that's also what she said. The idea is not to re-traumatize yourself, to reread and reread and reread a situation. And it's just like you said, it's always, we can't necessarily always find the absolute meaning in, like my friend's situation of this accident. Maybe it's just that it's just an accident. We find our way through it. We use the tools that we have. Her tool, largely in the spiritual realm, is her faith, is that community that comes with that faith. So she used those tools in order to move her, because I'm sure there's a very long path in this down the road where she's going to have to call upon them again, right? When, because not, I'm sure there won't be a perfect straight line for
Mhm.
her either.
Exactly. And we're going to touch on values a little bit more in
Mhm.
the next slides, but what I heard you saying, Shannon, when you were talking about not wanting to live in the rural area, and then you had to decide, did you want to be here for your family? And, that really speaks to values. But we will dive into that a little bit deeper because I think that's really worth exploring more. And we've talked about how do I get through tough times. Your friend is a perfect example of that. But if it's not your community, maybe that is not what it is for you. Really explore that. What gets you through those tough times? Where do you find comfort? Where do you find support? And who do you connect to in your community when you are looking outside yourself? Because there's always going to be someone, even if it is, we've talked about this before, even if it is those small occurrences, like I have a favorite store that I like to go into my community or go into in my community because the people there are always so friendly and so open, and that just lifts me up. It doesn't have to be so big as I have a huge faith-based community of 500 people and that's who I turn to. No, it can be those small things. So really explore that for yourself. And then taking it a little bit further, um, moving from that kind of internal, looking at your own self to looking, be observant of yourself, but looking at like, how do I connect to other people? Am I tolerant? Am I forgiving? Am I open to hearing other people's viewpoints and listening to their perspectives? Because that is also very important when you're cultivating your spiritual self. It's not just about one person. It's not just about you. It's about, how you look at the world and interact with the world as well. Are you aware of, the different cultures and ethnicities and people that are, like we talked about, newcomers in rural areas? Are you open to embracing them and learning about their cultures and maybe what it can do for you, right? Like, how can you adopt some of their values and some of their beliefs? Um, Not like in a more casual way, right? Like um if family in, some cultures, if family and communal kind of support and living is super important, maybe reflecting on that a little bit and maybe expanding your own view on what community is for you.
And I think that's such a great point. I've always loved hearing about how different people were raised and their cultures and their beliefs and their faiths. And, like I think of Margot, a friend of ours. She came from South Africa. She came here as a newcomer. And just some of her stories, not even just about herself, but also her helping other newcomers, and that
Mhm.
feeling of creating a community and finding their purpose here, being okay with what they're bringing with them, like some of their beliefs and so on, and how it is important to expand that so that we can embrace people as they come in. Doesn't mean we're, like you said, doesn't mean we're taking it all on, but certainly embrace it, learn it, and then maybe there's a way that we can support that. And we found this even in this project. We know that we have more and more newcomers. They're coming out to rural areas, which is very exciting to me. But how do we embrace that in a way that they can continue finding their spiritual self? And maybe because it builds ours in the meantime.
Well, I know as well, it builds on our resiliency through learning about what other people have gone through as well. My dad was an immigrant coming to Canada in the late 60s, and coming to a small city in Saskatchewan was a really must have been very tough. And I know when I've listened to some of his stories, or stories about that time for him, it, I'm grateful that he was able to endure all that to try to give his children a better life. And so it's just, yeah, learning about other people's experiences can expand our views and expand our ways of thinking.
Absolutely. And I think we talked a little bit, as you had said earlier, about when we're talking spirituality, it's pretty natural connect that we're talking values and beliefs. So how do we discover really what our own core values are? And are they absolutely written in stone, or can they evolve as well? I think that's something that is well worth questioning in ourselves, because it's like I said in our intellectual stuff, that I was pretty adamant, thought I was going to be a lawyer. That's just the way it was going to be. I had my own perceptions and understandings around that. Well, fortunately, as time has gone by and I was able to reflect on some certain things as I moved forward, found out that wasn't the place for me, just even based on, funnily enough, my own values of whether I could do that. And I'm not taking anything away from being a lawyer, but I think I would find myself in some pretty compromising positions of wanting to support people, because I'm pretty sure this is why I've landed here, that I can charge them for being a lawyer, because I would feel so bad about their situation. I'd feel I should help them for free in order to move them on. Well, then how do I survive? Not sure, right? And that's because it wasn't fitting within my own core values. I needed to land in a place that fit within that. So I didn't feel like it was constantly being pulled in different directions, because there's absolutely a lawyer, like any job, should be able to be paid. This was my own struggle of knowing that when I see vulnerable people or people in a tough situation, that I feel as though I should help them, right? So that was just my own kind of struggle, I guess, around trying to figure out where I landed before I landed in an occupation that wasn't going to support me well in those values and beliefs and so on. Even though I think that, like I said, you can do some wonderful work, but I think I would have been the brokest lawyer out there for sure.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's a great way to think about values. Values are just, we talk about foundations a lot when we're talking about wellness, and values really are, they're characteristic of the way that we live our life. We all have values, whether we really can actually identify them or not. But sometimes it's helpful to be able to identify your values when you're on this path of self-discovery, on this path of really allowing your spiritual wellness to blossom. One of the ways that you can do that is, like we talked about before, being reflective, right? It doesn't always have to be, being self-reflective doesn't have to be a chore. It doesn't have to be a big event. It's just taking things a little bit slower, stepping back, being a bit more intentional when we're going about our day. It's noticing feelings and thoughts as well. Because I think sometimes we do things so often and we don't realize that maybe we don't really like them. Like maybe they just, like you said, maybe it just doesn't fit with you. Notice that, make a note of it. You don't necessarily have to write it down, but you can. Most of us have cell phones. Just use the notes on your phone, have a little journal with you or a little notebook. Maybe you have a day timer, just write things down, something that doesn't quite fit with you. I think about this. I can think about this a lot when it comes to physical wellness, because sometimes we push ourselves harder and out of our comfort zone because we're trying to achieve something for our bodies. But it's like, it doesn't have to be. There's lots of different things. Um, Shannon loves biking. Well, maybe that doesn't fit with me. Maybe I need to find something else. Maybe I love to walk. Well, we don't all have to be the same. We don't all have to um, like or dislike the same things. It's just being able to be a bit more mindful and present with ourselves day to day to kind of um, pay attention to what gives us energy, what depletes us, or whatever analogy you want to use, what fills your cup up or what makes it overflow. So it is about being a bit more self-reflective and self-aware.
And I think that was exactly my point, that kind of windy journey that I talk about, that, yes, I remember being really upset, at the time of why didn't I get to do that? Why of this? And then now 5, 10 years later, when I look back, I'm thankful. I'm thankful that that situation didn't happen and it led me down this other path. And sometimes we have to ask for a little forgiveness of ourselves because we get pretty adamant, right? We think we should land in a certain path. And we try to ignore, like you said, all of those things that sometimes are telling us the very thing that we need to know. But by using a tool such as writing something down or just making a quick note, it gives us those kind of tips and tricks to say, oh yeah, last time I tried this, I felt exactly the same way. So maybe it's not for me. Maybe this is why when I look back across those 5 years and landed there 3 different times, I couldn't continue with it. And that's
Mhm.
okay, right? And in the spiritual journey, that's kind of what we're suggesting too. Try out different areas, like whether it's a faith-based spiritual wellness or something completely different. It's just allowing yourself to try and experience the feelings and noting them, so that if it doesn't land for you, it doesn't land for you. That's okay.
Yeah. And maybe, and again, I think you asked the question, do values have to be set in stone? Are they static? No, they're dynamic. And it's interesting also when you're on that journey of self-reflection to note something that didn't fit with you at this time in your life, maybe 5 years down the road, all of a sudden it's for you. And then that means that you've grown and
Mm,
developed and things have changed. And that's awesome. That's to be celebrated.
yes. But I think you brought up a really important point as well. Sometimes this is what gets in our way with like family, friends, because all of a sudden maybe it looks a little bit different, or partners, or whatever the case might be, because maybe somebody has grown in one
Mhm.
direction. Well, we're not saying that, oh, then that's it. That's never, you're never going to be friends again. You have to leave that partner, or you can't have anything to do with your family. No, this is now where we're calling upon that grace and that tolerance around values. And we talked about, if you ever have the chance to listen to a Dr. Jackie Linder, it's well worth your time. Great information. And she talks about, especially right now, we're all being challenged in our values and our beliefs across this last 2 years, because we don't know. We don't know exactly where we're going to land in this new world with pandemics and things like that, vaccines, whether we believe in it or not. And she tells a really great story about her and her friend, how their two values are not aligned at all. And it really, even for herself, it came into question, could they even be friends? And even because they landed on two sides of the world about one believing in vaccinations and one not believing it at all. And then why do we react so harshly when somebody doesn't believe in our value around that? And she's a well-educated person, has explored the world, explored herself. So she's not even at the beginning of her exploration process. And she said, I felt I was being very harsh, and I said harsh things to this person that I valued greatly because we couldn't land. And she said, sometimes you have to find out why that is. Often it's because of fear for that person, but that doesn't change the story, right? You're still landing on two different sides. So how can you have your values be alongside each other, but be different? And I think that's a really important message, is that as we're doing this exploration, our values may sit slightly different than the very people that we love the most. That's okay. The idea is, how do we find and give time and space to be able to sit side by side, your values here, that other person's values here, and allow it to just be without taking that other person, and without, because we're often looking for a right and a wrong and an absolute in that. And if we learn anything about spirituality, there is no absolutes. And that's the tough part in life. Is there really absolutes? Can we honestly know in 20 years where we'll be?
Yeah.
Not really.
Exactly. And I think just going back to the fear, because I think that's an important thing to note, where we may be fearful if someone's values and beliefs and their standards that they hold themselves to don't quite align with yours. It could be because you're fearful for them, but it can also be that you're fearful that you're wrong. And I think that's what happens a lot. And then we compromise our own values and beliefs because we're worried that they're not right. But like you said, Shannon, how do we really know? And I think the whole part about spiritual wellness is being okay with where you're at now and understanding and acknowledging that this might change as we grow and develop and learn and begin to understand all of this. But it still is important that in the moment that you develop that sense of self with a set of values and beliefs that are your own. And it's okay we definitely believe that there's no sense in reinventing the wheel. I think we've said that so many times, Shannon, we might as well not reinvent the wheel. Why don't we just draw from this person, use that person's experience? That's why we like to tell stories about other people that we know, because why would we just make something up? When we can use a tried and true experience and the learnings from that. So when you're looking to explore your own values, it's okay to pull off from the internet, for example, a common set of values. Just take a look at all those values and decide what resonates with you. And there might be a ton of them, and that's okay. And then start to sort those values, because you'll start to see patterns in the values themselves. And then you can group them into groups with similar ideas as you're doing this exploration. And then begin to choose this is when you're looking for your core values. Choose the most meaningful value out of each group to be your core value. You're still going to have all those other values, but if you're looking for your core value, because sometimes it's easier to just connect with a few things instead of hundreds of things. And it's not like you have to post on social media, these are my core values, or have it imprinted on a shirt, my core values are, because those might change, but it really gives you a sense of who you are, and it allows you to start to notice those things like we were talking about earlier. What's influencing maybe decisions, like Shanna's decision to come and live in this rural area to be close to her nieces and her nephew because she wanted that sense of family. That core value of family obviously was a big part in that decision. But if you have that in your mind, family is a core value of mine. that might make a decision down the road easier because you have that true sense of your own values and beliefs.
Yes, and we're not just talking time and space, like, people
Mhm,
can be just as close and they can be, if anything, we've been very fortunate
mhm,
for the advancements of our world is so much closer together. So you're right. I think that it is important to narrow it down. We ask families this all the time when we're supporting a family that they're being challenged with the behavior of their kids, as we all are, if we've ever been a parent. But it's because we need to be able to start with a foundation, right? And the
mhm.
core values are a part of that foundation. And you don't get it too broad because it's hard to act upon all those things. And then you feel like you're almost failing in it because you're not always acting on those. But if you
Yeah,
keep
you
it
can't even keep track of it all.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was just like, you know, we're going to speak kindly to our family, or we're going to use kind words when we're in this home kind of thing, keeping it simple, just as a starting point. Maybe it's going to broaden from there and a little bit bigger from there, but it's kind of that core of it that we feel that speaking kindly to people is something that we value as we move forward, so
Mhm.
that we're not thinking like we take that out even to the store, then even when we're really mad they don't have what we have, and maybe that person said something not very nice, but our core value is that we want to be kinder, so
Yeah,
we're not going to take out our anger on them because of that.
yeah. I'm just thinking back to the family piece. It just made me think about, you're right, Shannon. We're not saying move across the country because you value family and you need to be there. When my mom lived in northern BC and was hours away from me, and she was living by herself and in an isolated community, she made a point of, we talked once a week and every week, no matter what was going on, we tried to connect once a week and talk about what was going on in our lives. And that was just a way to be connected because that was very important. And it doesn't have, I mean, like you said, Shannon, nowadays with technology, FaceTime, there's just so much to do. My family, my kids all live in different provinces, and my husband and three kids and myself, we have a Snapchat group. And mostly I only post dogs because I'm working from home and it's dogs or yoga really, or what we're doing right now. But I get to see a little bit of their lives and it makes me feel a whole lot more connected to them because they don't always have time to FaceTime once a week for an hour or whatever it is. But those small things, that's really aligned with my values of keeping close with my kids. It's something so simple and something so attainable for me.
Yeah.
And because when they all left, it just really threw my life upside down because how was I going to maintain this big value for myself? Because where am I, like, how could I move to all three places, So it's just
Exactly.
really taking the values and being able to apply it to our lives, I think is so important.
Yeah. And that is such a great point, right? It can be simple things because we don't want to set ourselves up to fail in it, right? So
Mhm.
being too broad or the expectations too high is like almost calling upon that failure coming, and being still kind to yourself or forgiving for yourself when, it is a very important thing, but maybe it's not something you could follow through in the same way. So making sure you're aligning those things in a reasonable way. And that's probably why we say that with the families too. Don't get too big, right? Don't
No,
expect that
just
your
do what
kids,
is doable.
yes, your kids
That
aren't
makes
going to be
sense.
kind to each other all the time, but it's just a value that you believe in that you're instilling to say, okay, I wasn't very kind to you the other day, so I'm coming here to apologize because I shouldn't have said that. That's
Yeah.
still being kind, right? So
And
the
it's having that
expectation,
grace with
yeah,
yourself, right?
yes,
You
absolutely.
know, like if nutrition was something that, because nutrition is not just necessarily about physical wellness. Yes, it is, but it's also a way to nurture your body and, serve your body the way it deserves to be served. And if that's a core value is eating healthy, for example, or having, strong health, whatever it might be, you still have to be kind and gentle with yourself, because if it is making the most extraordinary healthy lunches for your children, and you're going to do that every day that they go to school, there might be a day you can't do that, and you need to just provide the healthiest lunch that you can with what you have in the fridge, especially as groceries get more expensive and we're trying to live within our means and buy locally and all that, right? Like we talked about in our environmental wellness webinar, but you have to be realistic, like you're saying, Shannon. I think that's
Well, that's
really
kind of what keeps us going, right? Like if
Yeah,
we're going to start the process, never start it, at something that is not attainable. Let's keep it simple and really call upon those things so we can continue to develop it.
because what's going to happen is if I hold myself to this standard of being 100% with my spiritual wellness or my physical wellness or whatever, that is going to start impacting other areas, because emotionally that's going to drain me at sometimes. Financially, it's not going to serve me occupationally. If I have to go away for a conference and I can't maintain this high standard that I've set, like it's just the impacts, you'll see it throughout the wheel. And so we need to be conscious of that as well, that it's, this ever evolving or rolling, like you said, Shannon, this wheel that's rolling along. We need to be interconnected with all the areas to keep that rolling smoothly.
I think while we're talking about this, the word that comes to mind for me is respect, right?
Mhm.
It's to respect the process, but respect ourselves in that, but also respect other people. It just seems to be
Yes.
kind of threefold. If we're going to go down this path of, self-discovery, asking people to respect your values, asking others to, like maybe they don't align, but we still respect somebody else's values, even though we have to stand side by side and not actually together. Yeah, I think it was just a word that kind of comes to mind, even as we're looking at this whole list of different ways that we could develop our spirituality.
That came to mind for me earlier too, when you were talking about being kind,
Mhm.
in the store, that example, that word respect came to mind too. So it's definitely a strong word. Like you said, let's just take a look at this list. These are just some things we put together because we're trying to think outside the box when it comes to spiritual wellness, and find things that you gravitate toward, find things that make your heart sing. And so practice yoga, pray, meditate. Just practicing mindfulness alone is a huge piece of
Mm.
cultivating that spiritual wellness, because it allows that to have that space to be able to connect with things outside of your immediate, like what's right in front of you.
And I think that's an important thing because, certainly right now we're hearing a lot of the use of the word mindfulness,
Hmm.
defining that mindfulness is about creating space, right?
Yeah,
Creating
for
the
sure.
time and space, and whether that's the energy to be able to go into the silent reflection, meditate, whatever it might be, or go to pray, go to your church service. That's being mindful of what you need and allowing yourself the time and space to do it.
Absolutely. Smudging, of course, is a
Mm.
way many cultures use that to clear the energy in a tangible type way. Cleanse your space, keep your space tidy. I know that sounds like it doesn't necessarily fit with this domain of wellness, but for me, I can't relax. I can't have the space that I need to be present when my space isn't tidy. So that's an important one for me. Both Shannon and I love to care and nurture for plants, garden, all of that. That's definitely a spiritual practice, I think, in some way.
Absolutely. That it's almost like that communing with plants, is
Yeah.
just connecting with the earth for myself, regenerating that earth in some way, makes me feel like I'm connected, not just to my past, but to that future. So it's just maybe envisioning it in another way.
Listening to uplifting music is always helpful for me. That's something I have always loved to do. Practicing gratitude, of course. We always like to challenge ourselves, and I think this is one that is a good challenge, is just, challenge yourself to take note of things in your life that you're grateful for, and try
Mhm.
to develop that into a practice, and just notice the changes that happen when you're expressing gratitude, whether it's just silently, thanking, being grateful for having the nutritious food in your fridge, or being grateful that it's somewhat sunny out today. Things like that, simple things.
And then doesn't that connect us back to that sense of hope, though? You know,
Right.
and I know there's been research projects and things like that around just saying three grateful things, like three things that we're grateful for a day.
Mhm.
Some say different amounts. That can change even the brain chemistry, our
Does.
physiology. But to me, ultimately, it leads back to that sense of hope. So
Yeah.
if just doing three things that we're grateful for and you not even having to act them out, is like you said, it could just be in your mind of saying, you know what, I am grateful that I was able to keep my rosemary plant living since the summer. And every day I see it, I'm grateful for it.
Wow, that is really good. I've never been able to move plants inside and keep them living,
And
so
my
that
house
is
is cut
something to be
here.
grateful for.
Yes. And it is bringing those kind of things that remind us of that, right? Of how to be grateful. Sometimes we need a little bit of help, to remind us, oh yeah, right. I am grateful for that. I put up a picture I painted that I am very happy with myself that I was able to do. And it reminds me how grateful I am that I had access to that, had the time to do that. It's just reimagining how we look at things.
Yeah.
It's
Shifting our thinking.
yeah. And it's like you said, like when I take my dog for a walk, I open myself up to those surroundings. Not all the time. I'm not going to say I'm peacefully walking every day. Some days thinking, oh, it's just really cold. Why did I do this? But as soon as I shift my thinking of, wow, I didn't notice that, or I didn't look at the sky tonight, it just totally changes my walk altogether.
Mhm.
My thoughts and my feelings, everything that in that moment has just shifted from I'm too cold, why did I even bother? All of those things to, wow, are we not like, how do we create such beauty in our world with just the universe doing that for us? It's just changing
Exactly.
the shifting of the thinking.
Yeah, it's very powerful. I mean, along with that, we've talked a little bit about self-forgiveness and compassion, and that's that kindness that we talk about so often. And then participating in the community groups for fellowship, for like our yoga community, right? That's what we're getting out of that. And then giving back, providing some service in your community, however that looks for you. Really trying to connect with something that's sustainable, I think, and um yeah, it's just going to be doable for yourself.
Yeah, and I think when we've done presentations for those young athletes, we talked lots about how do you also give back to your community. Maybe you're taking the skill that you have in whatever athletic endeavor that you're in, and you're helping somebody else do that. That was a big part of my childhood. I had friends who came back and taught me how to dance. I had friends who came back and taught me how to play the piano, because at the time that's not something I had access to. And I don't know if they'll ever understand personally the value of what they were doing for me, because they were just kids. So even as a child, you can give back a lot to your community, to your friends. And then on the other side of things, as a senior, the same thing. You have such a wealth and wisdom, like a wealth of knowledge and so much wisdom to offer kids as they move forward. No, they don't always listen. We all know that. But, deep down, that they will hear it at some level and feel connected to it as well. So you can give back in a multitude of ways.
Absolutely. And in that spirit of community, we always like to finish off with connecting to our community and what resources are available in our community. And we have our mental health and well-being resource hub on our website, sagewellnessconnection.com. So take a look at that. This is a work in progress, definitely. We are trying to build this and expand this. So we always like to give an invitation for you to connect with us if you would like your name to be part of this resource hub. It can be informal or formal services that you provide. We do have clinicians, we have personal trainers, different community members, FCS, the Impact Committee, a variety of resources like that. So again, we always like to think outside the box. So if you would like to connect with us, and if you know someone, or if you would like your website or your Instagram or social media account to be connected, please let us know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the purpose and intention of this piece of the project was to just get people connected to the community. And like Paula said, it can be very informal. We like to tell you about how we met a young lady that started a support group. She's not a clinician, but she certainly had a purpose in that support group and has been able to bring comfort and strength to other people that connected on this same topic matter. So that's all we're saying, is that belongs there as much as anything else. And this site is 24 hours, 7 days a week accessible. There's no monetary piece attached to it. You don't have to pay to use it. You don't have to advertise if you're a company that wants to be a part of it. It's just something, a part of the project that we want to make sure kind of creates ripples and gets out to as many people as possible.
Sorry, there was going to be some barking.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to get through one webinar without barking, but not quite. So
anyway, join in every time. We know this.
Yeah, she likes to be a part of it. So we'll leave you today. Thank you so much for being with us, and connect with us again for more information on the 8 dimensions of wellness.
And I really hope that you take this as an opportunity to begin to explore, discover, and connect to each one of those domains, and find a path that suits you, and that, you, like we said, you can take towards your future and always continue to grow. So thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again.